Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in Volume 9, chapters 31 through 40. Today we're going to be exploring the words of the Buddha in this Volume 9, which is titled The Six Sense Bases. The way that I do this program is I invite students in Zoom to be able to read a chapter. After someone reads a chapter, then I will share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to that chapter. You can ask your questions by putting those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. And if you'd like to volunteer to read, you can electronically raise your hand and then unmute your microphone and ask any and all questions that you like. So it looks like Pat is interested in reading. So Pat, if you'd like to go ahead and read, you're welcome to. And then afterwards, like I mentioned, I'll share some teachings on that. Then I'll open up to any and all questions throughout all of our platforms. So welcome to all of you guys. Welcome to our class today.
Only with sense control that one can fulfill the four foundations of mindfulness. Monks, save one and not give up six things. He cannot become one who resides in reflecting on the body as body. What six? Excitement in activity, excitement in gossip, excitement in sleep, excitement in company, being without a guard on the sense doors, and immoderate in eating. Surely, monks, save one and not give up these six. He cannot become one who resides in reflecting on the body as body, but one surely can if one gives up these six.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, the Buddha is explaining how to develop the four foundations of mindfulness, at least certain prerequisites for developing the four foundations of mindfulness. The way you develop the four foundations of mindfulness is through breathing mindfulness meditation and then practicing mindfulness in your day-to-day life. The four foundations of mindfulness are being aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. This is real pivotal in an individual's development on the path to enlightenment, because without understanding and practicing the four foundations of mindfulness, you would never be able to transform your mind. That could be said about all the other aspects of the teachings of the Buddha too, but in terms of what really is kind of like the linchpin that's kind of helping you to really move your mind towards enlightenment, it's these four foundations of mindfulness. Because that first foundation of mindfulness is the bodily sensations, where you're aware of the arising of discontentedness. And you need to cut off and let go of the discontentedness as a bodily sensation. With something like anger, that might be tingling in the body, moving up towards the chest, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, or pressure in the skull. This is the early warning system that you have that is alerting you that you're about to become discontent. And whether it's a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, the mind does this with all of these. And you need to be able to get to the point where your mindfulness is so well developed that you clue in to all the bodily sensations that are happening prior to a conditioned feeling. Not just the painful conditioned feelings, but the bodily sensations associated with the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and the neither painful nor pleasant feelings. Because that's where you can cut it off and let it go before the mind actually forms the feeling. If you keep allowing the mind to form the feeling, it stays wired to do that, and you haven't actually transformed your mind. And of course, between now and enlightenment, you will experience some of these discontent feelings, but you need to catch it sooner and sooner and sooner. You're not repressing your feelings here. You're actually cutting it off and letting it go before it becomes a feeling, just as a bodily sensation. And then if it does become a feeling, you didn't catch it soon enough, cut it off off there. That's the next best thing. If you don't catch it there, it's going to affect the condition of the mind, which is where you're kind of grumpy and irritable more long term. This is where the mind, for maybe a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, the condition of the mind is generally experiencing a conditioned experience, like pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, based on some condition. Then there's the mental objects, which are the deeply rooted containers in the mind. In this example, it would be ill will, but sensual desire is a mental object, conceit is a mental object. All the 10 fetters are mental objects, and you need to be aware of those so you see the symptoms of them and you can purify the mind of those mental objects. So understanding and practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness is vitally important, because this is the life cycle that discontentedness is going to take, and you need to be able to cut it off and let it go at a bodily sensation. And if you can get to the point where you notice the bodily sensations every single time, and you cut it off and let it go there every single time, you're about 1 to 3 years away from enlightenment. So it's going to take you a number of years to get to the point where you're able to catch it every single time. And then from there, you'll be about 1 to 3 years away from enlightenment, because you're easily able to notice the bodily sensations and cut off and let go. So cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which the Buddha talks about in other discourses, is vitally important to your progress on the path to enlightenment. And here what you're getting is 6 things that the Buddha is saying, if you don't eliminate these, then you're not going to be able to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first one is where he's talking about conditioned pleasant feelings related to some activity. Remember here, when you see excitement, this is conditional excitement, where based on some activity, say you're riding your bicycle, you're playing tennis, you're badminton, you're playing football, you're going to a concert, and you just get so excited, yay, I'm going to go on a trip, I'm going to go to Australia, I'm going to go to Thailand, oh, I just can't wait to go, oh, it's going to be so fun. This is the conditioned experience that the mind's having. What you need to be able to learn how to do is do something and enjoy it without the conditioned pleasant feelings. And this is where the mind is bright and cheerful and uplifted. So if you go to the airport and your flight's delayed or canceled, you can maintain your joy. Whereas if you get so excited in this activity that you're going to Australia, then when your flight's delayed or canceled, you're going to get the painful feelings. So understanding that those pleasant feelings are just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones is really important as well. So you can cut off and let go of the conditional pleasant feelings. So here the Buddha is saying that when you have certain activities, that you're going to need to eliminate these conditional pleasant feelings related to any activity. The same thing as it relates to gossip. If you have excitement and gossiping about people, which in order to gossip about people, there needs to be a certain amount of craving, there needs to be ill will, and there needs to be conceit or arrogance. If you have this excitement and gossip, then you're going to have craving, you're going to have ill will, and you're still going to have this conceit. So you need to not take this pleasure in gossiping. Instead, just eliminate gossip altogether, where you're not trying to damage and destroy other people's reputation. This is what the Buddha teaches you, because this is going to cause difficulties in the world, because you're causing harm to others, and now this harm is going to come back to you. So you would like to eliminate any kind of excitement in gossip, but actually eliminating gossip 100%, so you're not actually gossiping about people or slandering people. At the height of that, people could actually murder you and kill you. But at the very least, when your back is turned, those people are going to be gossiping and slandering about you potentially. So if you gossip and slander with others, those people get used to gossiping and slandering. When your back's turned, they're going to be gossiping and slandering about you. And there's all kinds of other things that can happen, like damage of property, damage of your own reputation, and all these kinds of things. So it's really unwise to gossip in general, but then of course taking excitement in gossip, you're going to need to eliminate that. Then the Buddha talks about excitement in sleep. Again, conditioned pleasant feelings related to sleep. There's no harm in going to sleep and cozying up with a blanket and be like, wow, this is really nice, right? And you can enjoy that experience. But what you're not interested in doing is getting conditional pleasant feeling related to the sleep. Because then if you have a certain idea in your mind that you're going to sleep 8 hours, and you wake up in 6 hours, you'll be grumpy and irritable because of that, right? So you need to eliminate any kind of excitement in sleep. Excitement in company is excitement in spending time with other people, like your friends, your family, your coworkers, things like this. If you get really excited, again, conditioned pleasant feelings, right? You need to learn how to enjoy these things, where you can enjoy being with people and spending time with people, but when it's over, it's over and you move on, right? You don't long and yearn like, oh, I don't want to leave. Because if you get so excited to go see this person, when it's time to leave and they're not with you, you're going to be dreading that. So you would like to get to the point where you can enjoy your time with those people, but you can also enjoy your time when you're away from them as well. And that's what an enlightened being is going to experience. But what the Buddha is saying is, in order to cultivate these 4 foundations of mindfulness, you need to eliminate these conditioned pleasant feelings in terms of spending time with other people and learn how to enjoy it rather than have conditioned pleasant feelings. Then having a guard of your sense doors, right? So that's why this is actually in this book to begin with, is that if your mind's longing, yearning through your sense bases, which it will, as long as you have sensual desire, you need to guard that. You need to notice when the mind is longing, yearning, and you need to restrain the mind and pull it back. I usually give the example of how when I was eliminating coffee and I was walking down the street and I smelt that odor of the coffee, boom, I was in the coffee shop. And that's because I wasn't guarding my doorways, that these sense doors were unrestrained. And as soon as I got that odor, boom, I was in the coffee shop. And realizing that's what I had done, then in the future, what I chose to do is I looked ahead to see if there's any coffee shops around and switch to the other side of the street. And I needed to do that for a good 3 to 6 months until the mind had fully let go of its craving, desire, attachment for coffee. And then now I can sit in a coffee shop and smell coffee all day long, and I have no interest in drinking a cup of coffee whatsoever because the craving's gone. But while your mind still has sensual desire, you're going to need to guard your doorways and understand that your mind's longing, yearning through these, and protect the mind by drawing it in, like we talked about last week with the turtle, where you're drawing in your sense bases. Then the last one here that the Buddha is saying that you need to be sure to eliminate is eliminate immoderate eating. In other words, eat in moderation. Some cultures, they have very large portions. You might feel like you have to eat all that food, but the mind is gorging on this food. Eating in moderation is going to help you to reduce your craving, desire, attachment to food. And another thing that sometimes people do with food is if they're feeling a painful feeling of any sort, they might crave food in order to get to pleasant feelings. Well, if you understand this whole process of how the mind works, that an unwise mind, when it's experiencing painful feelings or neither painful nor pleasant feelings, it can oftentimes have cravings arise because it's trying to get back to something that feels somewhat comfortable, which is those pleasant feelings, those conditioned pleasant feelings. So the whole reason why your mind is in the painful feelings is because of its cravings, desires, attachments not getting met, not getting fulfilled, and now it's in the painful feelings. Well, if you use a craving to get you to pleasant feelings, well, when your mind is no longer getting that craving fulfilled, you're going to end up back into the painful feelings. So the last thing you're looking to do, if you're wise, is to use a craving to get out of painful feelings and into conditioned pleasant feelings, because this is just making the circle continue to go around and around and around and around. When you're in those painful feelings, use the teachings of the Buddha, like breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and applying right effort to cut off and let go of any arising craving to move towards food or gambling or sex or shopping or any of these other things, because that's not what's going to create the permanent peace and the permanent joy. So if you learn to eat in moderation, what the Buddha teaches you is that when you have hunger pain, is eat just enough to eliminate the hunger pains, because then you'll know that the body has been sufficiently fed and now it has what it needs in order to conduct its day-to-day life. But if you just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating these large portions, then the body is gorging and you're not eating in moderation. So your mind needs to have some control around eating food and eating in moderation. So these are the 6 things that the Buddha is teaching you that you need to eliminate in order to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You guys have any questions here? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Would somebody like to volunteer to read chapter 32? Okay, it looks like Pat's going to go again. Go ahead, sir.
Taints to be abandoned by restraining. What taints monks should be abandoned by restraining? Here a monk, reflecting wisely, resides with the eye sense base restrained, the ear sense base restrained, the nose sense base restrained, the tongue sense base restrained, the body sense base restrained, the mind sense base restrained. While taints, frustration, and unrest, anxiety might arise in one who resides with the eye sense base unrestrained, the ear sense base unrestrained, the nose sense base unrestrained, the tongue sense base unrestrained, the body sense base unrestrained, the mind sense base unrestrained, there are no taints, frustration, or unrest in one who resides with the sense bases restrained. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by restraining.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, what the Buddha is talking about is restraining the sense bases. As we've been talking when we've been exploring this book, is sensual desires where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases, the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself, wanting permanently agreeable contact. And the problem with this is that you live in an impermanent world, so as long as the mind is craving for permanently agreeable contact, seeing contact as agreeable or disagreeable, then it's going to end up in the condition pleasant feelings sometimes, or the condition painful feelings, or the neither painful nor pleasant, depending on what type of contact that the individual is receiving and what the cravings, desires, attachments are. So what an individual needs to do in order to reflect wisely, as the Buddha describes here, is reside restraining the sense bases. And what this means is that you need to be observant of the mind when it's longing, yearning. When the mind's longing, yearning, you need to do like a horse. If you had reins of a horse and you pull it back and you restrain it from running away from you. And that's the same thing that you need to do with your mind. Say you're walking through the mall and a pair of shoes catch your eyes in the window, and your mind is like, oh, I want those shoes so badly. And you see the mind longing, yearning internally within your mind, even if you don't speak the words. You need to learn how to restrain the mind and ask yourself, do I need those shoes, or does the mind want those shoes? Because there's two different things. You can think about, is this something that I really need, or is it something that the mind is wanting? Is it trying to form its inner feelings based on external things? So the Buddha here is saying that if you restrain the mind, then the taints won't arise and there won't be any frustration. There won't be any anxiety because the sense bases are restrained. But if you're not restraining the mind, then because the mind is unrestrained, then there's going to be this frustration, this anxiety. Because, for example, if my sense bases are unrestrained, if I go into the shoe store and they have my shoe size, I might get really excited and really happy because now someone's going to see my shoes and I like these shoes. They feel so great on my feet, and now I feel so excited. But later, when they get marks on them or they're damaged or somebody steals them, now you're going to be frustrated or agitated or annoyed, having anxiety, right? If you go into the store and they don't have your shoes, because your mind is unrestrained and you're operating on craving, then they don't have your shoes, you're going to be frustrated, right? There's going to be unrest and anxiety in the mind. So that's why the Buddha is saying that you need to restrain the mind. And this is what's going to help you to be able to uproot the taints, get the fetters out of the mind so it can be fully purified and experience enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter, which is chapter 32, Taints to be Abandoned by Restraining. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 33. This is Taints to be Abandoned by Removing. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Pat, I think you're in the driver's seat today.
Yeah, it's a much smaller class today for some reason.
Yeah.
Taints to be abandoned by removing. What taints, monks, should be abandoned by removing? Here a monk, reflecting wisely, does not tolerate an arisen thought of sensual desire. He abandons it, removes it, does away with it, and obliterates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will, thought of cruelty, evil, unwholesome states. He abandons them, removes them, does away with them, and obliterates them. While taints, frustration, and unrest might arise in one who does not remove these thoughts, there are no taints, frustration, and unrest in one who removes them. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by removing.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is talking about sensual desire, this ill will, and this cruelty. This is essentially matching up to right intention. And what the Buddha teaches is to cut off and let go whenever these things are arising. And that's what's going to help you to remove it or abandon it getting it out of the mind. Because whenever a thought of central desire comes in the mind, that's where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases. So you're going to need to restrain the sense bases and pull that back in, right? That's what he's talking about in the last chapters, pull that back in. But now what he's talking about is just when the thought arises of the central desire, cut it off and let it go there, right? If you can cut it off and let it go there, the sense bases haven't even started to long and yearn yet because you're cutting it off at the root. So if you can eliminate that there, then your mind will act upon this craving, which whenever you're making decisions through craving, it's going to produce unwholesome dhamma or unwholesome results. And the same thing with ill will, right? As soon as the thought of ill will comes up in the mind, cut it off there, right? If you're noticing that the mind is longing and yearning and it's starting to function through this ill will, where there's starting to be bitterness and harshness and hostility through your intention, speech, or actions, now you're starting to produce unwholesome karma. But if you can cut it off at the root, that's going to help you abandon this out of the mind. And then any cruelty, like being interested in harming others. You would like to practice renunciation, non-ill will, or goodwill. And then you would like to practice harmlessness. This is the exact opposites. So the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness are the exact opposites of these. So you're going to need to have your mindfulness well established where you can see the central desire, ill will, and the cruelty arising in the mind, apply right effort to cut off and let go of that unwholesome quality of mind and bring in the wholesome quality of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. When the Buddha talks about complacency of a practitioner, of course, we can understand that complacency is choosing not to meditate or to read books or come to classes or seek guidance from a teacher and things like this. But the Buddha talks about complacency all the way down to the level of if you have an unwholesome thought in your mind and you do nothing about it, then the mind is complacent. So if you're walking down the street and you start judging other people and looking down on them, and you just allow that thought to reside in the mind, you're dwelling in that, that's complacency, the way the Buddha describes it. And the same thing's true about all of these. If you allow a central desire, ill will, or a thought of cruelty to reside in the mind's staying wired that way. That's why the Buddha is teaching you to cut this stuff off at the root, because if you uproot a weed, then it will never grow back. It's impossible for a weed to grow back. So that's the same thing as if you can cut these unwholesome thoughts down all the way to the root and you can uproot them, you can remove them and abandon them out of the mind, then there won't be any central desire or ill will or thoughts of cruelty. It just won't arise. It's physically impossible because there's no seed there. The mental object has been uprooted out of the mind. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you to go back all the way to the root and uproot this and remove it out of the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's move to the next one. This is chapter 34. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, I think Alberto and Leo is up next. I think you guys might have been looking for the button, right? I saw Alberto on the last one. He's kind of looking around for the button. You just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, benefit when taints are abandoned. Monks. When a monk monks, when for a monk the taints that should be abandoned by restraining have been abandoned by restraining, when the taints that should be abandoned by removing have been abandoned by removing, then he is called a monk who recites restraints with the restraint that all the taints. He has severed craving, flung off the fetters, and with the complete elimination of conceit, he has made an end of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. So the Buddha is basically combining the other two and kind of summarizing the other two discourses where he's saying, okay, if you've abandoned the pollutions of mind through restraining the mind, you've abandoned the pollutions of mind by removing the fetters out of the mind, then you've gotten to the point where you've severed craving, you've flung off the fetters, meaning you've purified the mind, and now you've made a complete elimination of conceit. So there's no more arrogance or pride or measuring or comparing or judging others. And now you've made a complete end of discontentedness. There's no more discontentedness in the mind whatsoever. And that's someone who's actually enlightened, who's accomplished this. So let me know if you guys have questions here on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. So maybe Leo would like to read this next one. All right, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Dispelling the contact. Monks, consciousness comes to be based on two things. And how, monks, does consciousness come to be on two things? Consciousness is based on the I and forms. There arises I consciousness. The I is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Forms are impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Thus, these two things are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. I consciousness is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of I consciousness is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, I consciousness has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? The meeting, the encounter, the combining of these three things is called eye contact. Eye contact, too, is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of eye contact is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, eye contact has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? Contacted, monks, one feels. Contacted, one craves. Contacted, one perceives. Thus, these things, too, are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Similar discourse were recited in the case of ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. In dependence on the ear and sounds, there arises ear consciousness. In dependence on the nose and odors, there arises nose consciousness. In dependence on the tongue and flavors, there arises tongue consciousness. In dependence on the body and physical objects, there arises body consciousness. In dependence on the mind and mental objects, there arises mind consciousness. The ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Mental objects are impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Thus, two things are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Mind consciousness is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of mind consciousness is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When monks, mind consciousness has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? Meeting, the encounter, the combining of these three things is called mind contact. Mind contact, too, is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The causes and condition for the arising of mind contact is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, mind contact has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? Contacted, monks, one feels. Contacted, one craves. Contacted, one perceives. Thus, these things too are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. It is in such a way, monks, that consciousness comes to be based on two things.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So here, the Buddha is helping you to understand what is contact, right? He describes this in other discourses as well. Well, when you have the internal sense base, which is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind, and then that then experiences the external sense base, which in the case of the eye is forms, then there's sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects. Those two things, the internal sense base and the external sense base, when the mind becomes aware of it, that is called eye consciousness, for example, or ear consciousness, or nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. That's when the mind then becomes aware that the eye and the form has now seen each other. Now mind is aware of this. This is called contact. And these things are all impermanent. But yet the mind, in certain situations, is going to crave for that to be permanent. In other situations, it's going to be averse to it and wants to push it away, right? Well, this is helpful for you to understand, because as the mind is longing, yearning through these sense bases, and it's trying to cling on to these things, you need to remind yourself, this is impermanent. Why would I cling to this? Why would I try to get these pleasant feelings from this temporary thing. Because as soon as I allow the mind to experience this temporary pleasant feeling, that means when that thing is no longer there, which it's no longer going to be there because it's impermanent, then the mind's going to experience painful feelings. So you can transform your mind this way. Let's say you're walking in the mall and your eye catches a sight of a beautiful woman or a handsome man. Well, you can redirect your mind. If you're trying to get rid of sensual desire and you're noticing that your mind's longing, yearning, and really wanting to cling to this individual and the way that the shape of their body is and the way they move and all these different things, you can redirect the mind and cut that off, not allow the mind to maintain its contact, right? This is going to help you to let go of sensual desire. Or if you're in a conversation with someone and you're noticing painful feelings, because the first one was pleasant feelings. If you're noticing painful feelings starting to arise, you're noticing with mindfulness that the bodily sensations are there, you can cut that off and let it go by redirecting your mind, walk away from the conversation. This is what's going to help you to transform the mind. But if you didn't understand that these things are all impermanent, your mind might continue to grasp and grasp and grasp. So that's where a discourse like this will help you, is that it's helping you to be able to see that all these things are impermanent, and it's breaking it down to the smallest piece of showing you how the mind functions. That having been contacted, when the mind is experiencing contact through the sense bases, one experiences a conditioned feeling if you allow the mind to dwell there, right? Now, when it experiences that conditioned feeling, then the mind is going to crave and long and yearn. And now the mind is going to form certain perceptions about that thing that it either sees, hears, smells, the flavor, the taste, the thing that comes in contact with the body or the mental object. So if you understand that this is the process that's going on, then you can break contact, not allowing the mind to experience that conditioned feeling. Then you won't experience the continued craving and you won't cling to any perception. This is how you break down this cycle of events, is this continuous cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. You eliminate it at contact. That when there's contact and you're noticing that there's a bodily sensation of feelings arising, redirect the mind. Or even if you're not sure, just redirect the mind, right? And this is going to help you to eliminate your sensual desire. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 35 from volume 9. Okay, it looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to make a comment that I think in my case I have to I'm a little bit struggling with redirecting the mind in cases of women sometimes, actually. I think I need to address this more because, for example, I was at the gym today. And there's a worker, some woman who's walking there, and she looks really nice and has a nice smile. And it's for me sometimes difficult then to look back. If you have maybe some, I know that I think it's good maybe in this case also to do the meditation for sexual craving, right?
Yeah. In order to get proficient at redirecting the mind and cutting off and letting go, there needs to be an accumulation of benefits, from breathing mindfulness meditation to practicing generosity and to applying right effort. That there's going to be situations where you have more deeply held cravings and it's going to be harder for the mind to turn away from that. But each day, each week, each month, your mind's getting more disciplined, it's getting more mature, where you're able to do this better and better. So these situations that you're in, this gives you an opportunity to practice the teachings. This is where you can see that the practice is more than just meditation, that you wouldn't be able to just sit in a cave and meditate, because as soon as you go out to the gym and you see a beautiful woman, all of a sudden your sensual desire has arisen, right? So this is opportunity for you to practice. So when you're going into the gym, prepare your mind before you go. Hey, she might be around and you're going to need to redirect the mind here. And just because your mind's still looking and checking things out and moving in that direction, take it in the opposite direction as much as you can, and continue to work with the meditation, with your generosity and applying right effort until the mind matures enough that it's able to. It'll probably take you several years, Leo, to eliminate this one. I know for me it took me several years, and you're doing this at a lot younger age than I did, so I imagine that there's even more craving in this regard at your age perhaps. So this is a strong one. Oftentimes people have central desire for some kind of contact with a human being, and they find them to be attractive in one way or another. So you're just going to need to keep working at it, and just understand it can take you multiple years to wear this one away until you've matured the mind enough that it's been able to let go. And then I'll add this thing as well. As you see other smaller central desires, because this one's probably a pretty strong one. Like say you're attached to a certain type of food or a certain type of clothing, or maybe when you sleep at night, you're attached to hearing the fan move around and you can't fall asleep unless you have the fan on. If you start working on some of these lower level attachments that the mind has, lower level cravings, it'll make those bigger ones a lot easier. So if you start chipping away at some of the smaller ones, this will also help you as well.
Yeah. Also realize sometimes I see then I remember that this is impermanent, this situation. I will not hook up with her or something like, she won't be my girlfriend or something. So I just need to let it go, look somewhere else. I think this is good to avoid. I also wanted to say,
one thing I can share on this too, Leo, one of the things you can do is, rather than seeing what you see, which is maybe a beautiful young woman perhaps, you can also think about it that this body that she has is not permanent, and understand that as she ages, things are not going to look the same. And you can imagine that in your mind rather than what you're seeing there, because oftentimes we think, oh, if I can just get that, everything will be so perfect. But now when you're with this person, as they age, the individual's uncomfortable with that maybe, right? So you can envision this individual's impermanent nature of their body. Maybe their hair falls out, maybe they have other things that happen. So you can kind of envision that rather than this youthful appearance that you're seeing in that moment. And this is helping to develop the unattractiveness of the body, because that meditation to eliminate sexual cravings is always there for you to be able to help you. And you can do that on your own, but also in the moment when you're going to the gym, if you happen to see this person, instead of envisioning her in the way that she looks in this youthful appearance, you can envision her looking in a different way.
In the moment, you said, right?
Yeah.
I can do it in the moment.
In the moment.
I don't want to eliminate the craving completely, right? And you shared that we can do it until we reach the second stage, and then right. So this is also a thing that I don't want to eliminate like sexual craving completely, because maybe I want to have a child later.
Yeah, if that's your goal, then you can reduce it, and then it's not going to be like you snap your fingers and one day you're having sexual drive and the next day you're not. It's going to be gradual, so you can take it down to whatever level you feel comfortable with, and then maintain some amount of that if that's what you're interested in doing.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 36. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
By way of right intention, monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and reflects upon, that will become the disposition of his mind. If he frequently thinks and reflects upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation, letting go, to cultivate the thought of sensual desire, and then his mind learns to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks and reflects upon thoughts of ill will, he has abandoned the thought of non-ill will to cultivate the thought of ill will, and then his mind learns to thoughts of ill will. If he frequently thinks and reflects upon thoughts of cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of harmlessness to cultivate the thought of cruelty. and then his mind learns to thought of cruelty. Just as in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a casual worker would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stake to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be beaten, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too, I saw in unwholesome states danger, dishonor, and defilement, and in wholesome states the benefit of renunciation, letting go, the aspect of cleansing. As I recite thus, diligent, dedicated, and determined, a thought of renunciation, letting go, arose in me. A thought of non-ill will arose in me. A thought of harmlessness arose in me. I understood thus. This thought of renunciation, letting go, has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own harm, or to others' harm, or to the harm of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to nirvana, enlightenment. If I think and reflect upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day, even for night and day, I see night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and reflections, I might tire the body, and when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadily mind internally, quieted, brought it to singleness, and concentrated. Why is that? So that the mind should not be disturbed. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and reflects upon, that will become the disposition of his mind. If he frequently thinks and reflects upon thoughts of renunciation, letting go, he has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation, letting go, and then his mind leans to thoughts of renunciation, letting go. If he frequently thinks and reflects upon thoughts of non-ill will, he has abandoned the thought of ill will to cultivate the thought of non-ill will, and then his mind leans to thought of non-ill will. If he frequently thinks and reflects upon thoughts of harmlessness, he has abandoned the thought of cruelty to cultivate the thought of harmlessness, and then his mind leans to thoughts of harmlessness. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops have been brought inside the villages, a cattle worker would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that the cows are there. So too, there was a need for me only to be mindful that those days was there. Thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here, what the Buddha is saying is essentially you are what you think, right? Like this is kind of like what we've been saying in kind of modern language. People say, whatever you think, that's what you become. Essentially, that's what the Buddha is saying here. So if you think about sensual desire, ill will, and thoughts of cruelty, then that's what's residing in the mind, and the mind stays wired that way. And the problem with that is then you might act upon that, right? Just having those thoughts in the mind is harmful enough to your own mind, but it's when you act upon them that you're now producing more and more unwholesome dhamma in the world. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is rewire this mind. So it doesn't stay wired with these unwholesome qualities, but you can break all that up, purify the mind and get that out of there so that now the mind can function in its natural state where it can be peaceful and joyful permanently without any discontentedness. So the Buddha is giving these different analogies here to be able to help you see that that's what he's guiding you to be able to do. And then ultimately he describes it down here that if you reside with the thoughts of renunciation, which is letting go, the thoughts of non-ill will, which is goodwill, and the thoughts of harmlessness, then that's what your mind will lean towards, right? And now he gives these two analogies of the first one where you have these thoughts of sensual desire, ill will, and cruelty. You need to constantly be on guard, like guarding the cows and making sure that they don't go into the crops. Where once you've purified your mind of these thoughts, you can be at ease, like the cattle worker being at ease underneath of a root of a tree, and just let the cows kind of roam wherever they would like to go, because they don't have to worry about where the cows are going, because the mind is purified of these thoughts. And this is ultimately what you're looking to do, is rewire this mind, is transform it. So whenever you notice an unwholesome quality, whether it's sensual desire, ill will, or being harmful, then cut that off and let it go. Don't allow the mind to dwell in that, because the mind's just staying wired that way. Let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions, so we'll go to chapter 37. Would somebody like to read this one? And this one is quite long for whoever chooses to read it. If you need to take a break partially through, you're more than welcome to, or if you need someone else to read for you, just let us know. Looks like Pat would like to read that one.
One who dismantles, not builds up, abandons and not clings to the five aggregates. Monks, those ascetics and Brahmins who recall and remember their countless past lives, all recollect the five aggregates subject to clinging, or a certain one among them. What five? When recollecting thus, monks, I had such form in the past, it is just form that one recollects. When recollecting, I had such a feeling in the past, it is just one feeling that one recollects. When recollecting, I had such a perception in the past, it is just perception that one recollects. When recollecting, I had such volitional formations in the past, it is just volitional formations that one recollect. When recollecting, I had such consciousness in the past, it is just consciousness that one recollects. And why, monks, do you call it form? It is deformed, monks, therefore it is called form. Deformed by what? Deformed by cold, deformed by heat, deformed by hunger, deformed by thirst, deformed by contact with flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and serpents. It is deformed, monks, therefore it is called form. And why, monks, do you call it feeling? It feels, monks, therefore it is called feeling. And what does it feel? It feels pleasure. It feels pain. It feels neither pain nor pleasure. It feels, monks, therefore it is called feeling. And why, monks, do you call it perception? It perceives, monks, therefore it is called perception. And what does it perceive? It perceives blue, it perceives yellow, it perceives red, it perceives white. It perceives, monks, therefore it is called perception. And why, monks, do you call them volitional formations? They construct the conditioned, monks, therefore they are called volitional formations. And what is the conditioned, and what is the conditioned that they construct? They construct conditioned form as form. They construct conditioned feeling as feeling. They construct conditioned perception as perception. They construct conditioned volitional formations as volitional formations. They construct conditioned consciousness as consciousness. They construct the conditioned, monks. Therefore, they are called volitional formations. And why, monks, do you call it consciousness? It recognizes, monks. Therefore, it is called consciousness. And what does it recognize? It recognizes sour. It recognizes bitter. It recognizes pungent. It recognizes sweet. It recognizes sharp. It recognizes mild. It recognizes salty. It recognizes bland. It recognizes, monks. Therefore, it is called consciousness. Therein, monks, the instructed noble disciple reflects thus: I am now being consumed by form. In the past too, I was consumed by present form. If I were to seek excitement in future form, then in the future too, I shall be consumed by form in the very same way that I am now being consumed by present form. Having reflected thus, he becomes indifferent towards past form. He does not seek excitement in future form, and he is practicing for distancing towards present form, for its fading away and elimination. Similar discourses were also spoken in the case of feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. The discourses then continued as following. What do you think, monks? Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. What is impermanent? Discontentedness or contentedness? Discontentedness, Venerable Sir. What is impermanent? Discontentedness and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Similar discourses were also spoken in the case of feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. The discourses then continued as following. Therefore, monks, any kind of form whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all consciousness should be seen as it literally is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Similar discourses were also spoken in the case of feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. The discourses then continued as following. This is called, monks, a noble disciple who dismantles and does not build up, who abandons and does not cling, who scatters and does not amass, who extinguishes and does not inflame. And what is it that he dismantles and does not build up? He dismantles form and does not build it up. He dismantles feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, and does not build it up. And what is it that he abandons and does not cling to? He abandons form and does not cling to it. He abandons feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, and does not cling to it. And what is it that he scatters and does not amass? He scatters form and does not amass it. He scatters feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, and does not amass it. And what is it that he extinguishes? It extinguishes and does not inflame. He extinguishes form and does not inflame it. He extinguishes feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, and does not inflame it. Seeing thus, monks, the instructed noble disciple experiences fading away of strong feelings toward form, fading away of strong feelings towards feeling, fading away of strong feelings towards perception, fading away of strong feelings toward volitional formations, fading away of strong feelings toward consciousness, experiencing fading away of strong feelings. He becomes free of strong feelings. Through freedom from strong feelings, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it's liberated. He understands. Destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. This is called, monks, a noble disciple who neither builds up nor dismantles, but who resides having dismantled, who neither abandons nor clings, but who resides having abandoned, who neither scatters nor masses, but who resides having scattered, who neither extinguishes nor inflames, but who resides having extinguished it. And what is it, monks, that he neither builds up nor dismantles, but resides having dismantled? He neither builds up nor dismantles form, but resides having dismantled it. He neither builds up nor dismantles feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, but resides having dismantled it. And what is it that he neither abandons nor clings to, but resides having abandoned? He neither abandons nor clings to form, but resides having abandoned it. He neither abandons nor clings to feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, but resides having abandoned it. And what is it that he neither scatters nor amasses, but resides having scattered? He neither scatters nor amasses form, but resides having scattered it. He neither scatters nor amasses feeling, perception, volitional formation, consciousness, but resides having scattered it. And what is it that he neither extinguishes nor inflames, but resides having extinguished? He neither extinguishes nor inflames form, but resides having extinguished it. He neither extinguishes nor inflames feeling, perception, volitional formation, consciousness, but resides having extinguished it. When a monk is thus liberated in mind, the heavenly beings, together with Indra, Brahma, God, and Pajapati, pay homage to him from far away. Homage to you, O thoroughbred man. Homage to you, O highest among men. We ourselves do not directly know, dependent on what you meditate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. This is quite an extensive discourse here, and I'm going to summarize it for you and kind of like break it down in sections to help you understand what the Buddha is teaching you here. So first, he's talking about abandoning and not clinging to the five aggregates, because whenever you cling to anything, there's going to be discontentedness. And specifically, when you cling to the five aggregates, there's oftentimes a formation of personal existence view in the mind. So this first part, he helps you to understand what the five aggregates are: form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. And I've taught this at different times during this program, so if you guys have questions on what those are, just let me know and I'll explain it to you. Then ultimately what he helps you understand is that all of these things are impermanent. They're going to lead to discontentedness, and they are not yourself. They are not who you are as a person. Because what he's guiding you to do is eliminate clinging to the physical form, to feelings, to perceptions, which are views and opinions, your volitional formations, which are your choices and decisions, and then the consciousness itself, which is the mind. Because as long as you cling to these things, you're going to experience discontentedness. So he's making sure that the students understand that they are impermanent, they're going to lead to discontentedness because the mind craves permanence in the unenlightened state, and that none of these things are you. This is mine, this I am not, this is myself. So what he's saying is this isn't what you should think of in terms of these five aggregates, that this isn't yourself. You are not this physical form. You are not the feelings, perceptions, your views and opinions, your choices and decisions, and your consciousness. And I can give you examples, if you like, about how the mind does cling to these things, thinking that this is who you are. But the Buddha is making sure that you understand that that's not who you are. Then he goes through a very elaborate way of helping you see not to cling to these things. Because as long as you cling to these things, then there will be strong feelings towards them. There'll be discontentedness. But for the instructed noble disciple, meaning someone who's practiced well, they're going to experience the fading away of any kind of strong feelings towards these things because they are eliminating their clinging. And that's where the mind is then liberated. It is now enlightened because the mind is no longer clinging to anything. And then the individual understands that their mind is actually enlightened. And then he kind of goes on further and kind of further emphasizes that. And ultimately he gets to a point where he says all these beings are going to essentially pay homage and respect because now you've made your way to enlightenment. And now you're this highest of human beings because you now are no longer functioning like an animal in the unenlightened state as a human being, even though human beings aren't animals. The unenlightened mind tends to function that way. But now by purifying the mind, you're becoming a better and better and better and better and better human being. And now the Buddha is saying, okay, you're among these individuals who have purified your mind, and these people will have respect for you, or these beings will have respect for you. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is a very long discourse to be able to make sure you understand the five aggregates and that you understand not to cling to them as thinking that this is who you are as a person, because that's going to help you eliminate personal existence view, that very first fetter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now we'll go to chapter 38. Would somebody like to read this one? None of them are as long as that one for the rest of the book, or the rest of today. Go ahead, Leo.
See as it really is. This world become a place by touch of sense afflicted, utters its own grief. Whatever conceit one has, therein is instability. Existence in another, bound to existence, yet in existence it rejoices. Excitement therein is fear, and what it fears is harm. For abandoning existence, this Brahma's life is lived. Whatsoever ascetics or Brahmins have said that by existence is release from existence, all of them are unreleased from existence, I declare. But whatsoever ascetics or Brahmins have said that by the stopping of existence there is a refuge from existence, all such are not free from existence, I declare. It is due to the foundation that this harm is produced. By the ending for all grasping, there is no production of harm. Behold, this many worlds, by ignorance afflicted, come into existence, and thus with what has become excited, yet from existence not released. Yet all existences, wherever and in whatever state they be, all are impermanent in harm and dominate to change. In one who sees as it really is, by perfect wisdom, the craving to exist is left. He joys not in its slaying, but craving's complete ending, complete stopping is nibbana. Thus become cool, that monk. No more reborn, no more existence. Beaten is Mara. He's won the fight, escaped all future existences.
Okay, so here the Buddha is just describing an individual who's making their way to enlightenment and individuals who are not enlightened. You know, here in the middle, he's talking about people who think that the way to get to the end and releasing from the cycle of rebirth is to exist in the world, right? He's saying that that's not the case here. So he's doing this in kind of a little bit of a poetic format, not too much, but just a little bit. He's kind of walking you through some of the various things like, you know, eliminating conceit and getting rid of grief and different things. So if you guys have questions on this, let me know. But he's essentially just kind of describing getting rid of craving and getting to enlightenment and so forth and so on, and kind of a little bit of a poetic form. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so let's go to the next one. And by the way, this here, my words, I'm explaining each individual thing in a more straightforward way. So here, the Buddha is saying, this world becomes ablaze by touch of sense afflicted utters its own grief. And then I'm sharing here, the world is engrossed and troubled by sensual desire, right? Just kind of translating this in kind of like a way that you might be able to better understand it. Whatever conceit one has, therein is instability. Conceit, arrogance, pride, judging, measuring, or comparing a superior, inferior of others leads to instability in the mind. Right? Existence in another, bound to existence, yet in existence it rejoices. Beings that are excited in existence and are bound to continuous existence because of continued excitement in existence, right? So I'm walking you through this. So if you aren't reading the words here that I'm sharing, this would be really helpful for you in all of these books to go through and read this, because here's a situation where I'm explaining for you in very clear terms that you can understand what it is that the Buddha is sharing with you. So you can walk yourself through this and be able to see what the Buddha is actually teaching here. Would somebody like to read chapter 39 here? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
One who develops mindfulness of death diligently for the destruction of the taints. Monks, mindfulness of death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit, culminating in the deathless enlightenment, having the deathless as its conclusion. But do you, monks, develop mindfulness of death? When this was said, one monk said to the perfectly enlightened one, Venerable Sir, I develop mindfulness of death. Monks, the monk who develops mindfulness of death thus, may I live just a night and a day, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. May I live just a day, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. May I live just half a day, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. May I live just the length of time it takes to eat a single alms food, meal so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. May I live just the length of time it takes to eat half an armsful meal, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. May I live just the length of time it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. These are called monks who dwell carelessly. They develop mindfulness of death sluggishly for the destruction of the taints. But the monks who develops mindfulness of death thus, may I live just the length of time it takes to chew and swallow a single mouthful of food, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. May I live just the length of time it takes to breathe out after breathing in, or to breathe in after breathing out, so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. These are called monks who reside determined. They develop mindfulness to death diligently for the destruction of the taints. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves thus. We will recite determined. We will develop mindfulness of death diligently for the destruction of the taints. Thus should you train yourselves. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So the Buddha here is talking about diligence, and he doesn't use the words here, but determination and dedication. He talks about this in other parts of his teachings, that's what it's going to take to get to enlightenment. You're not going to be able to just mosey on through and get to enlightenment. You're not going to be able to just be lackadaisical. This is a full-time job to get to enlightenment, and you kind of ramp up your practice as you go. As you start seeing more and more progress to the mind, you start becoming more and more dedicated and diligent and determined in the development of your practice. And what the Buddha is saying is like, hey, if you're aware that death is in the future, then you would do everything you can do to basically cultivate your mind and do as much of that as you can each individual moment, each individual day, because that's what's going to get you closer and closer to enlightenment. If you understand how peaceful and how joyful the enlightened mental state is, there's nothing that would stand in your way of getting to that mental state. And you would do it wisely, of course, but you're not going to allow just the mundane things about life to get in your way of getting to this peace and joy and this cheerfulness and this gladness that is the enlightened mind. So the Buddha is saying, okay, these individuals that are talking about, kind of attending to his teachings and learning his teachings in this kind of way that's here in this first big paragraph, he's saying, they're kind of sluggish, right? They're not really attending to the teachings very closely. And look at the time frame that he's talking about here. May I live just the length of time that it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls, right? And I can accomplish much, right? So that's what, maybe like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. He's saying, these people are careless, right? They're not really doing what they need to do in order to practice the teachings. They're kind of pushing it out too far. They're complacent. Instead, he's saying, you should, be much more diligent and determined in that. And he's using this analogy of eating food, something that people would understand, to give them a time frame, right? Because keep in mind that they didn't necessarily have hours and seconds, and they didn't have a watch and a timepiece. So he didn't just say, if somebody was interested in working to learn my teachings over the next 2 or 3 minutes, they would be sluggish. But if they spend time in the next 3 to 5 seconds working to develop the mind, then they would be more diligent. He didn't say that because they didn't have a timepiece, they didn't have a watch. So he needed to give people some frame of reference for keeping time. And something that everybody would be familiar with would be eating food. So that's what he's using, kind of relating it to the time that people were in. So he's teaching you to be aware that your death is in the future. It's coming, right? Every single person, our death is going to be coming. And what you would like to do is work as diligently as possible without craving, desire, attachment to wisely make your way towards enlightenment. And that is how you should train, is to not allow complacency or sluggishness to reside in the mind, but be diligent, determined, and dedicated towards getting to enlightenment and doing the needed work inwardly that you need to do in order to cultivate the mind for that. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter, 39. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So we just have one more chapter here today, which is chapter 40. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, Mr. Pat, go ahead, sir.
Supreme development of the sense basis. Now, Ananda, how is there the supreme development of the sense basis in the Noble One's discipline? Here, Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, there arises in him what is agreeable. There arises what is disagreeable. There arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus: there has arisen in me what is agreeable. There has arisen what is disagreeable. There has risen what is both agreeable and disagreeable. But that is conditioned, clear, dependently arisen. This is peaceful. This is superb. That is equanimity. Excuse me. The agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose are eliminated in him, and equanimity is established. Just as a man with good sight, having opened his eyes, might shut them off, or having shut his eyes, might open them, so too concerning anything at all. The agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose are eliminated just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the sense basis regarding forms recognizable by the eye. Similar discourses were spoken in the case of hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a physical object with the body, and recognizing a mental object with the mind, though with different analogy as the following. Sound, just as a strong man might easily snap his fingers. Odor, just as raindrops on a slightly sloping lotus leaf roll off. Flavor, just as the strong man might easily spit out a ball of spit collected on the tip of his tongue. Physical object, just as the strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm. Mental object, just as if a man were to let 2 or 3 drops of water fall onto an iron plate heated for a whole day, they would quickly vaporize and vanish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, the Buddha is talking about developing the sense bases to the point where you don't allow the mind to long and yearn for agreeable and disagreeable contact. That's where the peace and the joy is. That as long as you keep allowing the mind to pull in all these different opposite directions, the mind's shaken up. But when you have control over the sense bases, that's when equanimity can be established, because you're not allowing the mind to pull in all these different directions. I imagine for anybody whose mind is longing and yearning in any direction, you might see with your mindfulness that there's this muddledness, there's this discontentedness, there's this frustration or agitation that the mind's experiencing. Because if you get what you want, you get so happy, but then ultimately that fades away and ends up in the painful feelings. But if you're not getting what you want, then you end up in the painful feelings. So the mind can't be equanimous, which is calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. And the reason why equanimity is so important is because when the mind is calm and collected, you can have mindfulness or awareness of mind, you can have concentration, and you can access your wisdom and make wise decisions. As long as you're making unwise decisions in the world, that's going to keep producing unwholesome results over and over and over and over and over again. One of the reasons why an enlightened being is so peaceful is because everything that happens in their life is wholesome. They're experiencing all these wholesome things all day long, that they're not experiencing all this difficult situations that's coming at them. They just experience life in a very different way because they're not putting out harm. Harm isn't coming back to them. So in order to get to that point, you need to be able to access your wisdom, making wise decisions and continuing to produce wholesome karma. But you can't do that if your mind is all shaken up. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you to restrain the sense bases, getting rid of craving, desire, attachment, because the mind won't won't be shaken up. The mind will be calm and collected, and you can ultimately make wise decisions. If you think about times where you've been angry or frustrated or other discontent feelings, you can see that you made unwise decisions in those situations, where if you can restrain the mind, you won't actually get into those situations to begin with. You can have this equanimity. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here, and going through different analogies to be able to help you see, to restrain the sense bases. That's where it really starts, because you're going to be getting contact through these sense bases. And if you can get to the point where you restrain the mind and uproot the central desire, then your mind won't be pulling and longing and yearning. You won't be experiencing the discontent feelings, and your mind can stay calm and collected in every situation, and you'll be able to then experience wise decision making and experience wholesome results. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 40 of volume 9. Looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, I just forgot the last questions I had. Forgot something I wanted to add. So what I also realized is in these situations with women, that sometimes my ego comes up, and I would like to know how I can address this better, because sometimes I think that these women might find me attractive too. So yeah, I think this is the ego thinking that I'm attractive and the woman should also be attracted by me. So I know that I cut it off, let it go right away, and maybe redirect the mind and see that it's just my perception on what else you think I could do in situations.
Okay, so that's what you do in the moment, Leo, what you just described. So that's good that you know that. But then there's all those proactive things that you can be doing that are in volume 1, chapter 16. You're going to need to be doing a collection of those for a very long-term period. So that's like sleeping on the floor. You can read in the book all the different things that I share there about how to eliminate the ego. And this is another one of those things that takes a really long time to wear away. It's going to take multiple years. So that's why you need many of those proactive things. And that's why you need to cut off and let go in the moment whenever you see your ego arising.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Let me just take one more look and see if we have anything anywhere. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Oh, it looks like Alberto. For some reason, I always am interested to call you Carlos.
Sorry, it was my camera. I have a question about mental objects. I mean, I understand mental objects, the 10 fetters are mental objects, but are there other mental objects that are maybe at a lower level or more specific ones?
Yeah, so when we talk about mental objects, we're typically talking about the 10 fetters, particularly when we talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, because that's what you need to build awareness of, is the symptoms of the 10 fetters, because that's how you're going to purify your mind. If you don't understand what the fetter is, what the symptoms of it are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it, you wouldn't be able to actually eliminate it. So that's what the Buddha is talking about in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is the being aware of the 10 fetters. But then when he talks about the sense bases and he talks about other things, he uses this word mental objects in a different way, or at least that's the way we're translating it. So a mental object can just be a thought or an idea, right? But when we're talking about mental objects in terms of purifying the mind in the 10 fetters, it's always an unwholesome thing that's in the mind. That's a mental object, a deeply rooted container in the mind. But when we're talking about it through the 6 sense bases, a mental object could just be a thought about the past, where maybe you've been physically abused or sexually abused, and now your mind has that mental object. It has that thought or that idea of what happened in the past, and now you're forming a feeling today based on that thing that occurred in the past. We might think about this like conditioning of the mind, that the mind has been conditioned a certain way. And now what you would like to do is recognize that as a mental object, because there hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body. It's just through the mind, that the mind's thinking about this thing in the past, and now it's forming feelings in the present moment. And the same thing can happen about the future, that the mind can be thinking about something in the future, and now it forms feelings now in the present moment based on something in the future. So that is also a mental object, but it's not a mental object in terms of what we talk about with the fetters. Then there's other cases where we could even describe a mental object as something wholesome, We could even describe loving kindness or compassion or equanimity or sympathetic joy or even generosity. We could describe these as mental objects as well. There's very few places where the Buddha talks about it that way. More frequently than not, he's talking about it as the 10 fetters, or what I was just describing with the six sense bases, like a thought or idea that is coming through the mind. So you can think about mental objects in all these different ways.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I was confused about the two different uses of the word mental object or the concept mental objects in the teachings. So would a mental object also be, in the sixth space, the sixth sense space, a mental object would be like, for instance, that I perceive a friend as the party pooper, or my boss as the one who does not let anyone to, achieve their goals. And we have this negative perception about the boss, or someone who is this person is my inspiration to do things. Or as, I don't know, going back to Leo's example before, like, okay, this person or this girl is the reason why I'm going to the gym, but this is my motivation or whatever. So would this be mental object as well?
Yeah, you can talk about that as a mental object, but more specifically, we would say that you're clinging to your perceptions, right? Like there's a certain perception, there's a certain view or opinion that someone has, and now they're clinging to that. And we could call that a mental object, we could, but oftentimes the best way to think about it is clinging to a perception, because that kind of narrows it down a lot more closely.
Because I was thinking about also mental objects about the exactly when I have a perception, but then I see the person or an object or an activity, that I create a more abstract concept of that being, that person or that experience, and that stays in my mind. And that's what I don't know, that's what I understood sometimes to be a mental object.
Yeah, when we talk about the six sense bases, a mental object can be anything that goes through the mind.
Okay.
Anything that goes through the mind. When we talk about it as the four foundations of mindfulness, it's one of the 10 fetters, because that's what you're purifying the mind of. So that might be an easy way for you to think about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great question. Many people have those types of questions. Okay, I'm just going to take one more round of looking to see if anybody has questions. And I don't see anything anywhere. So I'm just going to end class by thanking all of you guys for joining and invite you to our future classes, because next week we're going to be finishing up this book of the six sense bases. We're going to be doing chapters 41 through 47. There's essentially 6 or 7 chapters there that we're going to be finishing up that book. And then we're going to be moving into volume 10 of the book series. So we'll be doing that the following week. So that's going to be Saturday at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Thai time. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be in Volume 1, Chapter 23. This is Symbolism of the Teachings, Reminders Through Imagery. This is where you're going to learn about all the different symbols that were used during the lifetime of the Buddha and that are still in use today to remind people of the teachings. So that way when you see Buddhist artwork or you go to temples and visit, you'll understand, because these things will kind of speak to you when you understand the teachings. So I'm going to be doing that tomorrow at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we'll be doing meditation with students and then opening up to any and all questions that you guys have. So thank you everyone who read. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for anybody who attended and is interested in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha, because this is the very best thing you could ever do for yourself, those close to you, and all of humanity. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.